The St. Louis Blues' season officially came to an end last night after the Blues fell to the Dallas Stars, but there is a lot of hope and excitement about the future of this team. And I have a good feeling that this offseason, some moves will happen that will put this team in the right direction. I'm going to talk more about this coming up here on Locked On Blues.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, St. Louis, and how are you? I'm Haley Taylor Simon, your host of Locked On Blues, your team every day, here part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, I will be talking about the final game that the Blues had, which was against the Dallas Stars. Then Bannister might stay. That is right. And more on Doug Armstrong's pressers. So a lot to dive into on today's episode of Locked On Blues, now that it's officially the offseason. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. I have to say, last night's game was a frustrating watch because this team, despite the loss in overtime, to me, they looked like a playoff team, the St. Louis Blues. And it's so frustrating because this season we saw them struggle against teams like the Sharks, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Islanders. I know the Islanders are in the playoffs, but when the Blues played the Islanders, they weren't doing well. But the Blues struggled against some of these teams that are not as strong. And seeing them against the Stars last night, and the Stars ended up winning the Western Conference, clinching that, it was frustrating to know that they won't be competing in the playoffs because they were so close, okay? Finishing 16th, it's insane how frustrating that is. But last night's game, it was really nice to see the final goal of the season being scored by the one and only Robert Thomas, because it is always Robert Thomas season here on Locked On Blues. And I know there's like a viral video going around of him missing that empty netter and Jake Ottinger stopping it. I get it, okay? But Robert Thomas had one heck of a season, something that he should be proud of. So it was, at least to me, very fitting that Robert Thomas was the last goal scorer of the season. The loss of the Stars, honestly, it wasn't as big of a shock. I think the guys, though, knowing that it went to OT, can take away a couple things. They can take away that they played a competitive hockey game. They gained a point. I know that may not mean much to you, but to me that means something because I saw a team that was still motivated. The broadcast, however, they were really like putting down the Blues by saying, oh, well, if, Dallas actually wanted to play. And I'm like, just accept the fact that the Blues scored a goal and it went to overtime. So the Blues finished the season with 92 points. I know what you're thinking. Hey, if they were in the East, they would be in a playoff spot, right? But they're in the West. So that's not how it's going to be. 92 points. I think at the beginning of the season, when I made my predictions, I'm pretty sure I had the Blues at 90 points. So 2 points over what I predicted, not bad. Obviously not good enough for the playoffs, but I'll get into that. I think it's just important to say that the St. Louis Blues, it's not like they were a train wreck. It's not like they had, these like 10-game losing streaks. They just weren't strong enough to make it to the playoffs. And at the end of the day, can't do much about it. A cool stat came out that the Blues finished this season with 11 more points than last season. So 92 points this season. Last season was 81, which is the 5th most improved point total in the league. So a little bit of a positive takeaway. Obviously, that takeaway just wasn't still good enough. But clearly this team, and I said this in the beginning of the season, was better when how they played last season. Because remember last season how bad it was? And they didn't change much about the roster heading into this season. All along, I said, I don't think those guys last season played to their full potential. Now we see that potential, that full potential that they played to. So what does that exactly mean? Well, it means a couple things. We have our goaltender, we have Binnington, and we have a Joel Hofer as a backup. But what are areas that we're missing? Well, defense, obviously, and even our power play. There's different things that this team is missing. I'm not saying it's impossible to fix, but it is something that this offseason they do need to address. You cannot go another offseason and make no moves whatsoever. And I think that in last night's game, I saw a resilient Blues team. And if there's one way to end your season not making the playoffs, it's to go against the best team in the NHL and put on a show. And that's what they did last night. And I was so proud of this team. I don't think many realize how difficult that is to try to find that motivation into a game where you may not really have that motivation. And they're able to find it. I said overtime. I'm in a shootout. My apologies. I know I put OT. It was a shootout. But it was still a phenomenal game last night. You know what's funny about it though? I was thinking OT because of that Robert Thomas overtime goal that he missed from that empty netter. So don't come at me. Either way, it's still a point and a point. But I mean, it is. It's not like it's not a point, but it is a little bit of a funny thing because it doesn't really matter, I guess. Right? I don't know, but the Stars clinched that first in the West, and the Blues didn't. But Coach Bannister did say, I was proud of how we competed in that game against that hockey club. To come in here for us with the season ending, I thought our guys competed hard. They came here to win. So I was really happy with the effort tonight. I think there's a positives that the guys can take out of this season. It's going to be a long summer for them, but I think they can reflect back on some things that they did well and things that we need to change. So that's how it goes, right? I mean, it is tough. And even the Stars coach even said, these games aren't easy. Give St. Louis credit. They didn't mail it in. They showed up and they played hard. Binnington was outstanding. They made us earn it. I'm glad it was that kind of game and not a blowout or an easy one. I think you want to play competitive games down the stretch going into the playoffs, and we had a bunch of them. Robert Thomas said, ups and downs. We had our chances. I think we made progress from last season. I think we took a step forward and we're getting close to what we wanted. And that's being in the playoffs every year. I think we took a good step forward, obviously, from last year to this year. It's just on building that, and we'll be back soon. And you will be back soon. I don't have any doubt that this team will get back to the playoffs. I don't. Next year, they're going to be in the playoffs. Mark my words. And I'm not just saying this because I'm upset with the results of this season. They just needed a few more points, right? And they would have been fine. So obviously, it's tough. Never easy knowing that your season's ending and that game 82 is the final game. You don't have any more hockey to play this season. It's done. There was no practice today because it's done, and that's how it is. And I think that for the St. Louis Blues, with how they played last night, they should be proud. They should be. I mean, did anybody expect them to play that competitive of a game against the Dallas Stars? And I think when you ask yourself that question and you reflect on, how their season's been, you might say, yeah, actually, they might be playing well because the Blues play really good against the better teams and then they don't show up against the worst teams. It's just inevitable that St. Louis Blues hockey for you this season. I'm done kind of questioning it because at this point, it is what it is, but it can be a little bit frustrating if you have no idea why this team does what they do. But today, a lot happened. Doug Armstrong spoke, Bannister spoke, lots of things to discuss. So I'm going to talk about that. I also just got finished watching something and I want to address that on the other side because, well, I got a little teary-eyed, and you might be wondering, why did I get teary-eyed? I'll tell you why. But first, I want to tell you about my friends over at Monopoly Go. Guys, I need you to all listen up for a huge announcement. I've been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eyes on the scores, putting my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce I'm finally on top. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on the classic Monopoly. You can play it anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon while ranking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties just like the classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on iconic properties or go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls into their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So get yourself on the charts and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store and Google Play. So today, Doug A spoke. Doug A. Get it? Because like Doug Armstrong's like Doug A. Okay. He spoke. I was like, oh, great. It's Doug Armstrong speaking. And he said a couple things about the future of the Blues. And I'll get on that. And there's going to be a lot to digest, a lot to discuss throughout the next couple of days. But one thing that he did say was, obviously, when it comes to coaching for next season, it's been something that he's been thinking about. He stated ever since the coaching change, he, in his head, he knew that there was a couple guys, but he was very impressed by how Drew Bannister was this season. And he did say that Drew Bannister would be one of the few people he was going to talk to about the position going forward. Obviously, Drew Bannister came in when our beloved Craig Berube was fired in the beginning of the season. And Drew, who was the coach of the Thunderbirds, T-Birds, ended up becoming the interim coach. And here we are now. So I asked you on Twitter at Locked On Blues, is this a good or bad move? Comment down below because I'm curious. Now, I'm going to give my opinion. I think Drew Bannister, and I said this all in all, he's done a good job for what it is, right? Talent, we need more of that. But for what the Blues have, he did fine. Is he the best coach? No. But again, this is the first time him coaching the NHL. And I always said a more experienced coach would be better. The problem is right now, there's really not a lot of coaches, in my opinion, available. And I feel like that's going to happen within the next couple of days. The season's wrapping up tonight. So I'm sure that, more moves will be made. But I wouldn't be upset with it either at this point. So the Drop Hockey Show says, do people think Armstrong doesn't know who he's bringing in as head coach? He's had months to interview several candidates he already knows. And that might be true, but I want to believe that Doug Armstrong is going to be transparent with this fan base for once and for all. This fan base deserves transparency from Doug Armstrong. Greg says, I feel we need a more experienced coach. I would have let Drew hang out a little bit longer down with the T-Birds or as an assistant coach. Blues need experienced coach and better defensive pieces. I agree, and that's what I've been saying, so I like that. Jeremy says, I feel like if he was really being considered, the job would have been given to him today. Exactly. Mike says, not good. Hopefully just one of those things you say because the guy's in the buildings. Bruce said he's not against it. Blading Blues says, as an assistant, sure. As a head coach, no. Kyle says, I wouldn't be against it. He's definitely proved himself to be capable. He helped turn the team around. We almost made the playoffs. We finished above 500. And the season where I didn't think that was going to happen. Austin says, bad. Here's the thing. I think for what it's worth, I thought it was a little bit strange too. So that it's strange because I really thought that if he was going to be getting that head coaching position, he would be offered that position, right? Like, why is he going to be speaking to Bannister and other people if it wasn't going to be his job? And let me know if I'm the only one that thought that. I thought that was a strange thing. I mean, I know that they were both together, so it was like one of those things, and you know what it is, but just weird, right? Um, Again, I don't mind doing an episode breaking down different coaches that I think would best fit the Blues, but Doug Armstrong did say that he spoke to multiple candidates, speaking to people. He knows who he wants. So I'm curious for when that comes out. I would much rather just comment on, that aspect of things rather than just come up with different coaches. I mean, we can do that, but did you see that save that Ottinger had on Thomas? Yeah, I did. I saw that. It was unbelievable. And but you know what? I think that this team is heading in the right direction, going back to what I was saying. And I think that with the right coaching staff, getting some better defensive players, because defense is important, good things can happen. But I was watching the Blues' cup run. And that's why I told you I was getting a little bit emotional today. And looking back at that cup run, one thing that I noticed that I didn't see much this season was the dynamic force we had on the ice with Schwartz, with O'Reilly, um, Tarasenko. I mean, we really had some players that were just so forceful and dynamic. And it was a 30-minute documentary. I finished watching that before I did the podcast tonight. It came up on my suggested feed, and I was like, okay, this is a sign for me to watch it. And it just made me realize that we're missing kind of some of those power forwards in a way. And I didn't think that we were missing that necessarily because I'm like, okay, we have Robert Thomas, we have a Jake Neighbors, but we don't have those players that we had back then that scored us those crazy goals. And I think that's what we're missing too. So let me know, what do you think the Blues are truly missing? And how can they change that heading into the next season? Because again, you can't get everything fixed in an off season, but there is some things obviously that I want to be fixed because I am frustrated with how the season went, and I'm sure you are as well. So it just sucks, right? But I'm going to talk more about the presser today, but I do want to let you know about my friends over at Polygenius. Polygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with financial safety net starting today. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that are just $292 per year for $1 million coverage. Some options offer same day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. So, listen. If you have no incentive to recommend one insurer, they have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can really trust their guidance. Thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Check life insurance off your to-do list with no time with Polygenius. Head to polygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's polygenius.com/lockedonnhl. Another big takeaway from this press conference today, besides me just being so annoyed with Doug Armstrong yet again, was the fact that he talked about a player about he's one of my favorites, but it was Pavel Buchnevich. Essentially, it looks like he might be getting an extension. It's heading that way. He does like him a lot. So, yeah, that could be exciting. Um, he said, about Sundqvist's surgery, about how that hurt, and that was another thing, and that He has a pulse on the direction he wants to go in as far as hiring a coach, which we talked about. So that's positive. But he said before June 1st, so that's good. Kyrou is a game-breaking player and has become a lightning rod. So, again, positive. Dvorsky will push for opportunities next year. Plans to, obviously, as I said, to approach Buchnevich about an extension, but understands Buch will have questions about his team's long-term plans, and he plans on having conversations. So that's a takeaway. Essentially saying he likes Kyrou. He wants to extend Buchnevich, but understands if Buch is like, okay, well, what's going on here? That's basically it. We don't know what's going on with the coaching position. Draft is coming up soon, June 28th. I will be there in person covering it for the Locked On Blues podcast. But it seems like Doug has his work cut out for him. And I'm sure that this next couple months leading up to the draft will be busy, busy, busy for me, for you, because we don't know what's going on with this team yet. I think that a lot of people are, hard on Kyrou. Obviously, Doug is happy with how Kyrou has played this season. Another thing is, and again, this is just how crazy the NHL world can be. Obviously, the Arizona Coyotes are relocating. Well, it's happening to Utah. And I'm already seeing some rumors from people saying that Jordan Kyrou will be a part of that team. I just want to put this to rest because I did a lot of research on it, and I just want to make sure that everything is set in stone. The current Coyotes roster that they have right now is going to be the same roster that they have in Utah. It's not an expansion draft. That's not what's happening. So to everybody that's like, oh, they're going to pick up Jordan Kyrou, they're going to have the same players on their team. Obviously, like any team, they can make moves this offseason. But I've been seeing that rumor going around, and I just wanted to put an end to it because it's not fair to anybody right now that's a Coyotes fan that has to deal with it. It's not, okay? But this Utah team will be in our division. So they're going to be in the Central. So nothing, in a sense, will change with realignment of the division. So I just wanted to address that because it's been hectic in hockey land. And while I could go on and on about our off season, which I am obviously here on Locked On Blues, I just want to also take a moment because I did collaborate a lot with Robin on Locked On Coyotes. And while the Blues and Coyotes, we had, we actually had a lot of good games in the beginning of the season. I just hated how the schedule didn't have us play each other again for a while. I just want to say that it obviously sucks when anybody's team has to be relocated. I mean, remember when our team back in the day, it was it was the place in Canada. It was like Skatoon or something Blues. Like they were trying to relocate and then the NHL shut it down. But there was a whole scare of that. Every single NHL team, for the most part, has gone through a scare of their team potentially being relocated. The Washington Capitals, the Pittsburgh Penguins. You have obviously the Jets. You have Atlanta. You have the Nordiques. You had Hartford. You've had all these teams in the National Hockey League face relocation or be worried that their teams might be relocated. Obviously, it's not ideal. For the NHL, I can see, I'm going to say this. As a fan, I'm sure it sucks. Okay. I understand what the NHL is doing. I think that the decision was made. But from somebody that knows how passionate of a fan Locked On Coyotes was, to know that I've had Coyotes fans, look at my podcast when I do pregame shows with the Blues and Coyotes. It does suck that city or state, I should say, because it was Arizona. But it just sucks that fans, the real fans, are losing their team. And I just wanted to address that. So it's one of those things that I felt like needed to be addressed, and obviously, it's gonna be a weird season next season. There's gonna be a lot of drama this offseason, I can tell you that. Just in general, I feel like the NHL has just elevated a whole new level of, like, just chaos. So, that's that. Again, I know that the regular season has come to an end, and I just wanna take a moment to thank you, St. Louis. I have a hard time sometimes putting this into words with how much this podcast means to me. And I've talked about this before, but being a Blues fan and not living in St. Louis, obviously it's tough. Have friends where I live that are Blues fans, and it's really nice. But I found a community on this podcast that lets me talk about my team every single day. And, interviewing the players this season, and those interviews, as I said, will be out shortly because I wanted to save them for the off season, was truly incredible. Hanging out with Jamie Rivers and being able to interview, Kyrou and Bennington and Thomas and Neighbors and Sunquist and Walker, it was just really cool. So a lot of different things like that. But the point that I am trying to make is that this team has a bright future ahead. Disappointing ending to the season, absolutely. But it's not going to be the end of the Blues pushing to be in the playoffs because I promise you, they will be. A lot to talk about this offseason. We have maybe a coaching change happening, contract extensions, free agency, draft prospects, the draft that I'll be attending in person, covering it for the St. Louis Blues' Locked On Blues podcast. So much going on. So definitely stay with me this offseason and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is at Locked On Blues, or the Twitter at Locked On Blues. A lot of Blues coverage coming, exclusive coverage, interviews, and so much more. And I can tell you this offseason is going to be an offseason like no other St. Louis. And it's going to be hectic. But luckily, you have me who will make sure that you get all the coverage and all the news and all of the discussion possible. So thank you for an incredible season. My first season doing this podcast, and a season where there was a step in the right direction, as Robert Thomas said. Well, I'll talk to you tomorrow. So I'll see you then. And like always, St. Louis, let's go Blues.